So up next, we have a presentation from King Energy, which is an Australian-based private energy company pursuing hydrogen, helium, hydrocarbon as part of its 3H strategy. King Energy is currently focused on the exploration of its Helium project in the Officer Basin in South Australia. I'll hand you over to Managing Director Richard King to tell you more.
Hey Jane, how are you?
Very well.
Thanks for inviting me along. Much appreciated.
Not a problem. I'll let you jump into it.
Thanks again, Jane, and hello to everyone that's attending. Apologies ahead of time if you hear my dog wailing because she's waiting for her morning walk, given that it's 9 o'clock-ish over here in Perth. Just some quick background on King Energy, and I'll get into the pack as we go. King Energy is a relatively new private company established in 2022 with capital backing from the Moderna group here in West Perth. Started out our journey with onshore assets in Australia as well as in the US. And our focus now is, a very tight focus now on the South Australian Officer Basin assets. I think we've been, again, thanks to Jane, because I feel like I'm in a advantageous position with this spot because Trevor Brown from Omega has already spoken quite widely about the East Coast market. He probably made a lot of points for me that I would otherwise have made, where he talked about East Coast prices, $14 a gigajoule, supply deficit increasing, therefore forecast increases in prices. He talked about the urgency around gas supply to the East Coast as part of the green transition. He talked about the need for new basins to be brought on as quickly as possible and limited large-scale projects in the pipeline. And King Energy slips right into that space. And also thanks to Hyterra as well for bringing up the hydrogen story and talking through some of the key geological fundamentals of hydrogen. Right, normal disclaimer. Read it at your leisure. So King Energy, look, we are positioned to secure Australia's energy needs going forward. We're in a very advantageous position with the Officer Basin. We've got company making subsalt basin in South Australia. We've got about 3 or 4 very large ranked leads or prospects, which we will be ready to drill the lead prospect within the next 12 months, which we call the Rickescoat project, and I'll come on to that quickly in a moment. We were established as a 3H company, so hydrocarbons, hydrogen, and helium. Again, straddles very nicely the 2 stories we heard earlier this morning from Trevor and from Omega and from Hyterra. So we are well positioned to try and capture all of those products from the Officer Basin. We have direct hydrogen and helium and hydrocarbon measurements on block. Hydrogen and helium samples have been taken in various wells that have been drilled in the Officer Basin during the 80s and 90s, and more recently in the 2010s. So we've already got a lot of really good data that hydrocarbons are present, that hydrogen is present, and that helium is present. Again, I think we're also building on the work that's being done by Gold Hydrogen down on the Yorke Peninsula. We think that anything there is being generated by the cratons in coming out of the Officer Basin, and which outcrop in the Officer Basin. We can also draw on the Officer Basin Neoproterozoic, so we can also draw on the Amadeus Basin, which is sister Neoproterozoic basin to the Officer. basin, and we know that structures with salt seals in the Amadeus basin are effective for trapping of helium and also for obviously for charging helium through the various geological mechanisms that apply there. The team at King Energy comprises a very experienced set of executives. So Agu Kansler is our non-executive chairman. Many of you may know Agu. Agu was the head of exploration, EVP of exploration for Woodside for many, many years. Prior to that, the exploration manager for Shell and South East Asia. And more recently has been on the Oil Search Board, the Central Petroleum Board, and various other companies. Myself, I come from a commercial background with a bunch of the usual suspects, most recently country manager for Cuffbeck. Stuart King, my brother, we set up the company originally. He's an experienced explorer, and we have Matt Hansen, who has got a lot of experience in the business as well. So a quick overview of the project: 2 permits, 253 and A81, covering 20,000 square kilometers of acreage. We obviously, as I said, Neoproterozoic basin. It's pretty uniformly laid down, the geology and the sands compared to the Amadeus basin. We've got 3, there's prospects, leads and prospects have been mapped everywhere. Our main prospects are the Rickerscote, Milford and Milford East. We've got some volumetrics have all been worked up for that. So on a P10 high case, we're looking at 4.1 TCF of gas and 620 million barrels of oil from the Rickerscote project alone. Mean success volumes sit around 1.5 to 2 TCF of gas from Rickerscote and about 200 million barrels of oil. And we expect, in the event of success, the lowest possible, the deepest reservoir seal pair will likely have high volumes of helium and hydrogen, especially based on the helium percentages that have previously been recorded at Magee and Mount Kitty up in the Amadeus basin. So this is our wind line of seismic. So there's 2D seismic acquired right across both of the permits. The seismic is quite sparse with wide grid, so we'll be doing some infill seismic early next year. The purpose of the infill seismic will be purely for identifying where we should drill our well on the Rickerscote prospect. And this is obvious from this seismic line. We want to try and hit the crests of the 3 reservoir seal pairs that we have identified. So we've got reservoir seal pair that's at about 1,200 meters. Seal is a whole heap of mud. Our second reservoir seal pair is at about 1,600 meters, and then at the bottom, and this will be important for the hydrogen and helium, the deepest reservoir seal pair, important for hydrogen and helium story, is there's a big, thick 150, 200 meter chunk of salt seal with reservoir that's sitting on the top of high uranium, thorium, ancient granite. And that just builds on the story that High Terror have already told us about the geological formations, that high uranium, high thorium granite splitting the molecules. And we've got probably the only seal mechanism that works to hold hydrogen and helium back with 150 to 200 meters of salt across the basin. And it's really underexplored and a great new basin to explore in and open up. And if we're successful, we would expect there to be a bit of a gold rush into the Officer Basin. So the Officer Basin itself has all of the play elements proven, but exploration has been scarce, and we'll talk about that quickly in a moment. So reservoirs have been proven through wells. So the stratigraphic wells that have been drilled, as well as exploration wells that have been drilled. Top seals have been drilled, so we know they're there. Source rocks, multiple source rocks have been identified and intersected, so we know they're there, and the structures exist. So we're in a good position to keep on driving this forward. Quickly, I spoke about the hydrogen and helium story, so I won't go into that anymore, other than the uranium, thorium-rich granite rocks, the big salt seals that sit above that. We have H2 and HE sampling done through FIS and DST previously, so all that data exists and demonstrates the presence of it. And we're obviously to the north, Amadeus Basin can generate it, and all the work that gold hydrogen down on the York Peninsula is generating that there's something there in South Australia. So lots of wells have been drilled, mainly minerals wells, as well as wells by Geoscience Australia, the South Australian government, to properly define the basin. And most recently in the 2010s, there were 3 exploration wells drilled. So from all of these wells, that we know that the wells demonstrate the presence of reservoir, they demonstrate the presence of seals, they demonstrate the presence of source rocks. There are multiple oil shows through all of the wells, as well as oil being shown to be present in various reservoirs. Now, the latest wells that were drilled in the 2010 were the only wells drilled sub-salt. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, those wells were drilled off structure. And when you look at the seismic, looked like they were seeming to drill a stratigraphic nose, so a pinch out, and drilled those. There was nothing there. They were a way off where structure might have been. But thanks to those wells, we know the salt seals are there. We know the reservoirs are there. So that's a good outcome. We will be drilling on structures. Nobody's drilled on a structure in the Officer Basin. So if I flick back up here, so we'll be drilling on this Rickerscote structure here. We will be drilling within the next 12 months on this structure. The structure is 197 square kilometers with 3 reservoir seal pairs. So we're really looking forward to that and driving it forward. From a commercial is always really important, obviously. Hydrogen, in the event of hydrogen, we all know that the hydrogen economy is still in its infancy and developing, and perhaps getting it from Australian markets to international markets remains not conceptual, it's the wrong word, but remains very much early in its development cycle. In the event of a robust economy growing, I suppose Hyterra is in a very fortunate position, being in the US, where there is big demand and growth for hydrogen. In Australia, our development plan would be to take it down to Whyalla and Port Bonython, pipe most likely, and then use that to export it or convert it into green ammonia, my preferred approach to transporting hydrogen, and where green ammonia can be recracked to hydrogen or used as a direct input into power generation. There's a lot of movement in Japan, for example, on having dual-fired power gen using ammonia as well as conventional resources. Helium, again, we all know helium is a very, very valuable, high-priced product. I think we're somewhere around $500 plus at the moment per MSCF, and we would be targeting about 500 BCF of helium in the event of success, in the lowest or the deepest reservoir seal pairing. So a big, valuable product already demonstrated in Australia that's easy to ship by road transport, and there from there to international as well as local markets. Now, if we look at our hydrocarbons, so gas and oil, we focus primarily on gas. Our Linear project is in the western part of South Australia, but still well placed to access multiple gas hubs within Australia and take that gas to market. I suppose everybody will know the Moomba hub is probably one of the best, well-placed, interconnected hubs in Australia for gas, having access to the Queensland gas pipeline, Moomba to Sydney and the Moomba to Adelaide pipelines, and therefore the interconnected gas transmission system on the east coast. It's about 700 kilometres from the Linear fields to Moomba. Yes, that's a fair distance, but we've built much bigger pipelines in Australia. We have started engaging with some companies in terms of what that pipeline might look like and costs around that. So we're working through those sort of concept assess phase work. The other options for gas from the Linear project is take it down to Whyalla area and look at building a new chemicals precinct in South Australia. Again, we've had some initial discussions with various chemical companies about how that might work and what that might look like in the event of success. Possibly LNG, a 3-4 million ton train. How much back to a million tons, about a TCF. So in the high case 4 TCF, you might be able to put in place a 4 million ton train. I know the South Australian government or department officials have suggested would we and will we be looking at that? Maybe something to further evaluate in the event of success. Oil, obviously we've flagged that the mean success volumes are larger, 200 million barrels from the one prospect, with P10 volumes up about 600 million barrels. So clearly we need to know what our commercialization plan is in the event of success. There we would look at doing it on a phased basis. So we'd get wells online early and truck that oil. And as we build the full scale project, we would look at taking a pipeline down to Port Bonython, process and ship out of Port Bonython. Again, can that be done? Yes, it can be done because it's been done before for liquids out of Moomba down to Port Bonython. There's roads to follow in terms of building a pipeline and looking at those options. So look, the basin's there. We know the basin's working. We've got structures clearly defined. We've got large volumes and we've got commercialization pathways to take the project forward. So like I said earlier, we're really excited. What is our schedule looking like? We will be in the field later this year taking additional soil geochem samples. In parallel with that, we're currently running all of our contract and approvals processes for infill 2D seismic. As I said earlier, that's to identify the best location for the well to hit the crests of all of the various reservoir seal pairs. And we're also running in parallel to that our contracting and approvals for drilling the first well. As per this schedule, we are targeting to have that first well spudded within 12 months from completing a capital raise. So to deliver all of that, King Energy is looking at going to IPO late 2024, early 2025. And within 12 months from there, we will have completed all our work programs and be ready to drill the first on-structure well in the Officer Basin. Back to you, Jane.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll actually just get you to stop sharing your screen there. Unfortunately, we've run over time here, Richard, so we do not have time for questions, but I would encourage the attendees, if they do have any questions for Richard, to reach out directly or contact one of the team members at JMM and we can put you in touch. But thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jane.